Before we begin, thank you very much to Ghost935 for joining my Patreon campaign. Very appreciated. Thank you so much for the help and to help keep the channel going. Guys, I don't know if you noticed this, we're like super close to hitting the $600 point, which means I'm going to be forced to do Beast Machines reviews, which means I need to hurry up and finish the Beast Wars reviews, doesn't it? All right, so hopefully over the weekend we're going to do that. We're going to play catch up. I might put some of the daily content on hold so I can double up those episodes and get them caught up really quickly. Because that has been way too long, and I do apologize for that being up on the back burner so long. I'm trying not to burn out because I do that to myself all the time. But thank you for your patience, and thank you for getting me to this point. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to continue along with everybody else. So let's talk transformation. So over the years, I think everyone who's collected Transformers long enough has picked up a toy here or there that they just refuse to ever transform ever again. Now, this could be for a few reasons. Number one, you bought it for one mode or another. You don't really care that it transforms into a robot. It's just a super cool looking jet, you know? Or you don't really have an attachment to this weird vehicle mode, but it turns into a really nice looking Autobot. So, you know, why ever switch modes again? Or you might have bought it two different ways. You might have bought it twice so you could have both modes available at the same time. There's people who do that still. You could be refusing to transform it because of fragility. A G1 Mirage, for instance, is very dangerous to transform, as is a Transmetal Megatron. So those are conditions we also have to worry about. We're not really concerned about anything like that, about fragility, disinterest, or just a general lack of desire to do it. We're doing this specifically for the hardest toys to transform, that they are so annoying, so fiddly, so complicated, or just strangely designed that you're just not gonna touch them. Ever again. So this is not a definitive list. And keep in mind, it's different for literally everybody. I could have top 10 this, but there's plenty more than 10. And they are for all different reasons. So I didn't feel like a top 10 was appropriate. So let's just go over a quick list and I'll get your feedback later on. I think the poster boy for this is the one you've been watching for the last couple minutes. Sideburn was the first toy that I think the community kind of rallied around and just went, no, this is way too hard to transform for what it is. This was a $10 toy back in the day, and everyone had trouble transforming this because it wraps around itself. It goes inside out. It flips parts around seemingly unnecessarily just to get one piece into one certain part. And for what? For a robot that is wearing the entirety of its alt mode as kibble hanging off of its body. The only part of his vehicle mode that is contributing to the robot mode specifically is the chest with his engine. That's it. Like even the hip blocks, you know, are just his rear fenders and wheels hanging off his hips. You know, he's got one loose tire under his arm. He's got a bumper on his shoulder. You know, the hood, the hood and the doors are just hanging off his back. He's got a riot shield made at the top of the vehicle. It's a mess. Like, for something that really doesn't try to transform, it transforms way too hard. So, this was the first one, but this is the first one Americans knew about. Now, in Japan, they've dealt with this before, because a year before they had Speedbreaker, they had Mach Kick. For some reason, a lot of these that are so slow to transform are named after speed terms. I don't know why. But Mach Kick is another one that people just kind of dread. And I've owned this toy before too, and it's a mess to get it back into the horse mode. See, at this time, Japan, and especially during Beast Wars Neo, Takara had this really weird idea that it was easier to engineer a new Transformer with a beast mode if they just take the animal, break it up into shells, and just have a robot tucked in there that the shells hung off of. A lot of later Beast Wars toys done by Takara kind of seemed disinterested in actually using the bulk and the mass of the animal that they were transforming from to actually influence the robot mode. You know, and that just seemed like from Beast Wars 2 and then to Beast Wars Neo, it got worse and worse. So I think Mach Kick is like the definitive for that. But I know there's others. I know there's some people like I never actually owned a long rack, but I've heard this kind of the same thing about him too. Where he's kind of frustrating and unsatisfying the way he works. Like I said, haven't had that one in hand to know for sure, but I know it's a name I saw come up when I did the research. So yeah, that mindset in Japan of it's just shells hanging off the robot that kind of bled into car robots, and that's how we get Sideburn as well. I mean, and then there's complexity. So Revenge of the Fallen is one of these toy lines that was just complex for the sake of complexity. They were trying so hard to make these $10, $15 toys as movie accurate once you're in robot mode as absolutely possible. And it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. So what you ended up with were toys that relied way too much on panels and pegs and tabs to interfold into each other to try and get this robot to look right, and just way too much detail work. Way too many unnecessary moving parts. Now, Mudflap was the poster boy for it in this line, but oh, there is so much worse. I mean, Mudflap I don't think is hindered by the fact that I'm pretty sure the whole thing was broken from the get-go, because I could never get mine to transform correctly all the way. But there was plenty of others. For me, it's Mixmaster. Mixmaster is the one I tell people, like when I talk about overly complex toy, I talk Mixmaster. Because the instructions will tell you it's 17 steps, but it does not lay those steps out very well. And there's like a lot of these 17 steps have like 2 or 3 extra steps built into the instructions. So you're looking more to like 30. And it's ridiculous how annoying this toy is to transform. I used to talk to a dealer at a convention about the nightmares he had transforming a whole bunch of Mixmasters to take to another show. And it's like literally like he's talking about just doing 4 of them. It took him an hour to transform 4 of them. You would think after 3 you'd have it down. Nope. That's still 15 minutes out of his life gone just taking a robot into a cement mixer. Always hated this toy, by the way. Always hated this one. The one that people talk about in Revenge of the Fallen the most, though, is Optimus Prime, because it is an incredibly involved toy. Lots of complexity here, and I will commend it. I will always commend this toy for how they got such a movie-accurate look out of a $40, $45 toy at the time. And to even include a sound and light box in it, too. There's some really impressive design work going into this figure to make sure that it works as well as possible. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't cheat either. The chest and door window, the windows on the chest that form like the windshield and the doors on the truck actually do form those parts. So that is how like involved this toy is. I can remember my co-host on the WTF at TFW podcast over at TFW2005.com. Aaron would talk about the first time he experienced one of these toys, and it took him like 40 minutes to transform it from one mode to another. And as soon as someone said, now do it the other way, he taps out. No, I'm done. And no, don't blame him. I don't blame him. I haven't picked this one up in a long time, so I can't remember exactly how hard it was. I named it one of my toys of the decade. I'm not taking that back, but it can take a better part of an hour to actually do it. But then there's those that followed Revenge of the Fallen. For the most part, you start getting away from that over complexity. I honestly thought Dark of the Moon had a much better toy line as far as just enjoyable toy experiences. However, you also have things like this. So when they first got into Generations, they were still kind of in that mindset. And there's a whole slew of toys I could put on this list for the same reasons. And that would be things like your Deluxe Sergeant Cup from around this era. You're like even the Deluxe Optimus from War for Cybertron, because we entered this era where the vehicle modes, they are like making up parts of the robot, and they are like actually involved in the transformation. However, they're using so many tabs and panels to accomplish the transformation, it just gets really unpleasant, and it's a task of like just fiddling parts together until all the tabs click together and hope none of them break in the process. There's a whole slew of toys like that. For me, it was always this Bumblebee. I hated transforming this Bumblebee, despite how much I really liked the vehicle mode. You know, I mean, if these rumors of Studio Series War for Cybertron toys are true, I really want them to do a new Bumblebee because I love the look of this one, and I would love for someone to take a better stab at it. Now, modern day engineering and budget what it is, maybe not. But for the most part, this is the kind of thing that always bugged me when it came to transforming. Like, these are some of the most uncomfortable transformations for me, when it becomes more about like folding panels together than it does actually shifting parts and turning one piece into another piece. One we talked about recently was alternators. Now, alternators, for their time, yes, very complex. Now, when I was transforming Ravage for my recent video, it wasn't the complexity that was really getting to me. For the most part, it wasn't hard to figure out. If Ravage really, like, it was two things. One, it was just how stiff the parts were. I chalked that up to being in the same spot for 20 years. But I would also blame it on clearance issues. Alternators were exceptionally difficult because of clearance issues. Because in order to get that interior correct and like car accurate all the way through this toy, they had to make sure a lot of parts were very, very close together. And the transformation became really unpleasant as you had to try and get parts around each other, especially if you own a Vinyl Tech and you're worried about scratching all the die-cast parts. To the point where it was just unfun to do. You know, like Grimlock here on screen is one of the worst offenders and one of the ones that people complained about the most. And I own the Vinyl Tech version, and I was like frightened to transform mine. He's not the only one guilty of it. A lot of the alternators are kind of like this, but I would definitely say that the ones that everyone always complained about the most was Grimlock and Wheeljack by proxy. So, I don't think they're as bad as we remember them, and they're certainly more complex toys now, but they have their own issue that does make them painful to transform, and I can understand why someone would never bother putting it back into vehicle mode. We can move to Masterpiece, which I think this is the one where a lot of people are really guilty of, I never want to transform this again. I've messed with Masterpiece toys that are genuinely magical in how they transform. I would say Ironhide. Like, I'm still wowed by how that toy transforms into this boxy van into a show-accurate robot, and manages to do it without any kibble hanging off, no backpack to speak of. It just collapses into itself perfectly. It uses its bulk perfectly. You know, and it's an amazing toy, and that it's a complex toy, but it's intuitive in nature, and I will still have fun transforming that toy once in a while when I'm in the mood. When I had MP5 Megatron, I never wanted to move that thing back into gun mode. Aside from the fact that gun mode was ridiculous, and you had to have basketball player hands to actually hold on to it. No, it was just an unpleasant transformer to mess with, especially because it felt like you were going to break everything, because the parts on this, in order to have a proportionally scaled gun mode, you had some really thin parts that were really scary to mess with, especially anything that required like a stiff pull. So a lot of Megatron was just, I feel like I'm going to break this thing at any moment, because so many parts were so thin. And then they went and did 2.0, the cartoon-accurate Megatron. And you know what? It's a far better toy. It's a far better interpretation and representation of G1 Megatron. It's not any better to transform, and now for a completely different reason. I don't think I'm going to break it so much as I think I'm going to scratch it. This toy has a lot of steps. There's a lot of very small, finicky little parts that you have to move to transform this toy from one mode to another. And the thing about this toy was that for whatever reason, Takara decided that even the parts that were just flat gray were still painted in gray. that they were trying so hard to get the cartoon accurate look that they wanted the whole thing painted so it had this matte finish to it and there was no like gloss plastic left over. The result is, yes, a very cartoon looking Megatron toy. It is also a toy with a ton of surface areas that you are so careful about while you're transforming it, especially back to gun mode where you start pressing those parts together. So this is one I own, and I've never transformed it back again. You know, it came in robot mode, turned into the gun once, turned it back into the robot mode, and it's been a statue ever since. And there's another one from the Masterpiece line for me that is, I'm guilty of that too, and this seems like a sin for me of all people, but I'm the same way with Dinobot. Like, that Dinobot is a gorgeous piece of toy, but you know what? When I actually get into my hands, its transformation is so complicated, I don't want to transform it. Again, it's a magical conversion. Like, okay, his back is a little bit puffy from stuffing a raptor into it, but it is a really impressive job getting, you know, that robot that shouldn't work and shouldn't be possible to turn into a working transformer into something that actually looks quite a lot like the raptor from the show. Is it perfect? No. There's gaps. There's exposed robot parts. But you're asking for miracles if you think that that's going to be completely taken care of. You know, remember, the animation model, the transformation, cheated very much in the cartoon. It is literally impossible. I probably should transform it back one day, but it's going to be for a while. It's got to be just the right mood. I have to have an afternoon set aside for that. And I could continue. I don't have a lot of Masterpiece movie experiences, but I've heard the same of a lot of Masterpiece movie toys, and that doesn't surprise me. When you involve the complexity of Masterpiece and the overly detailed designs of the movie toys, okay, I can absolutely see why that would be a mess. It's one reason I've never bought a Masterpiece movie toy. Aside from just not liking the aesthetic as much anymore, I dread the concept of transforming one of these things. You know, like, I'm not a fan of how movie toys transform at the retail level, let alone at the collector level. But I don't own any, so I can't speak directly of them. So I'm just going to mention them here. The one that I can talk on, because yes, I do own this now, as we are well documented on this channel at this point, that would be the Haslab Unicron. I can know a bunch of people who are never going to transform this either out of planet mode or out of robot mode, depending on which you prefer. And for me, I would say no. I would say that there is going to be a point where I'm going to want... Mine is robot mode right now, but I prefer the planet mode. So I am going to transform him back to planet mode at some point when I feel like it. And even then, I'm going to want to see the robot mode again. So I think that this is the important lesson here. It is, you know, that Unicron is a beast to transform because it's so many big parts hanging off of hinges, and trying to keep the whole thing balanced without falling apart or without breaking anything is like stress inducing. But I'm willing to go through it again because I don't think it's that bad compared to some of the others. Like, I think it's straightforward as compared to some that are on this list that are just super finicky and annoying to deal with. And then the big point to this is it's all different for everybody. For me, Unicron, I don't think it would be too big of a deal to transform again. But for a lot of you watching, you might not have a problem with Mixmaster. You know, an Alternator probably never gave you any trouble whatsoever. Sometimes the transformation scheme just clicks with how your brain works. Nothing wrong with that. But everyone's going to be a little bit different in that regard. So for me, this is a spread of toys that, yeah, I'm kind of guilty of. A lot of these, I am never going to transform again. And I know a lot of people out there would be the same way. Just because it's just, for their own reasons, way harder than it's worth. So that's a quick little rundown. Just something that I think we can all relate to if we are, you know, a Transformer collector that's been around long enough. Share in the comments below what your most annoying Transformer is. The one that you never want to transform again. And keep in mind, like I said, a lot of reasons for why that could be. Kind of curious about any of them. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was a trip down a painful memory lane for you. But that's what we're here for, is to remember the good times by remembering how much better we have it now. So, until next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.